you are of a certain age, or if you have young children, you may recall the 1960s Disney movie Mary Poppins. Like none of you do. Well, there's a memorable scene in that movie where Mary Poppins sings to the children, who are determined to stay awake because so much exciting stuff is happening. Do you remember the song? Okay, here it goes. This is the first verse anyway. Stay awake, don't rest your head, don't lie down upon your bed. While the moon drifts in the skies, stay awake, don't close your eyes. And Mary Poppins is a great amateur psychologist. She knows that singing a lullaby with the same words repeated over and over again will lull a tired child to sleep, even if the words are stay awake. Jesus' words in this apocalyptic passage from the Gospel of Mark have a tendency to do the same thing, especially to those of us who have heard them many times before. Keep alert, keep awake, Jesus says. Yawn, we say. Especially as we know that the people who first heard these words did pass away before all these things had happened. The reason to keep awake seems to have lost some of its urgency over the many generations since then. And yet, every once in a while, some person with overflowing energy and charisma will try to persuade others that the end of the world is imminent. David Wilkie, in the comic book Coffee with Jesus, as you heard me quote before, has Anne, Carl, and Lisa having coffee together in the cartoon entitled We Are Still Here. Anne says to the others, "Wow, we're still here." And Carl replies, "All that worry for nothing. Man, I feel kind of stupid now." Lisa chimes in, "The way you behaved at that end of the world party last night is why you should feel stupid, Carl. But yeah, glad that's behind us." And at the other end of the table, still present but seemingly forgotten, Jesus says, "Hey guys, over here." That's really the potential problem with these end-of-the-world projections and with those who say that they have the key to unlock the book of Revelation. There was one sitting in the corner who said that no one would know the day or the hour that these things would take place. And ironically, as we enter the season of Advent with its potential opportunities to notice and mark time, we are never busier. We spend a lot of time wandering malls and shopping online and going to rehearsals and performances and appearances of Santa Claus. There are moments of beauty when our breath catches in our throat, but we also lose track of time, and all the rushing doesn't relieve our anxiety. We want to be ready in a few weeks for Christmas, gifts purchased for family and friends, and perhaps dinner prepared for our guests, but we also yearn to know and to be known by the one that we call Lord. It's as if Jesus has to shout his admonitions about staying awake and alert in order to be heard over the muzak at the malls, and he has to hold a flashing sign to compete with the blue light from computer screens that keep us artificially awake and in a shopping stupor. The gift of Advent is that it focuses us on the passage of time. 4 weeks of Sundays of Chronos time, the time we can follow with watches and clocks, and the unmeasurable Kairos time, the opportune time, the time found within and beyond, and bearing special meaning. In Advent, we hear of the end of time, and we hear of the child whose coming is the fulfillment of time. Barbara Brown Taylor, in her book An Altar in the World, tells of a woman who was old and lived alone, and was afraid to go to sleep at night for fear that she would not wake up in the morning. So she lay in her bed, waiting for the sun to come up, before she dared to shut her eyes. We read, "Then someone who loved her suggested that as long as she was awake, she might as well start listening for the first bird that sang each morning. Before long, the sound of that bird became the bell that woke her heart to life again. She named the bird. She discovered what such birds like to eat and put feeders full of seed in her yard. Other birds came, and she learned their names as well. She began to collect birdhouses, which she hung from the rafters of her porch until she became the mayor of an entire bird village. She still does not sleep well, but she's no longer afraid of her life." This woman found a way to use her fear of Chronos time, the time that runs out for all of us, to access her sense of Kairos time, the time in which a whole life may be lived out in a moment of insight and ecstasy. Peter Marty, in his book, The Anatomy of Grace, uses his preference for analog rather than digital watches to help us focus on the deeper dimensions of time. He says, "This is not called to throw away your brand new digital watch, but think, for example, what a round clock announces when its hands rotate past the midnight hour. In that moment of handing over a brand new day, God is giving a fresh chance for us to be more in touch with time. It's God's offer to help us tie our lives more tightly to the experiences of the day. It's an invitation to notice the circadian rhythms of nature and the biological turnings within us. My watch does not help me manage time," he says. "But the steady movement of its hands around the circumference of a circle reminds me that a really good life is always organized around a center. A well-lived life revolves around a fixed point. Much like the way the gravity of the sun holds the planets in orbit, so the gravity of God holds us through the evolutions of our lives. God becomes the fixed point to which the rhythms of all creation owe their existence." So imagine what life might look like if we gave even a little more attention to appreciating this gift of time according to a circle. We'd probably catch ourselves watching finches at the bird feeder more often, enjoying children playing happily in supermarket aisles, and pulling over our car to take in more sunsets. A watch may be nothing more than a timepiece. Then again, it could be the very instrument that helps us organize our lives more closely around a holy center bearing the name of God. There's a mention of Chronos time in Jesus' words today. He says, "Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn. Or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly." Do you know what I happened to think about when I read those words as I prepared to preach today? Although I've read and preached on them many times, what struck me is that this Wednesday at 1 o'clock, Chronos time, we're beginning to pray together from Daily Prayer for All Seasons as a way to begin our Wednesday Open Church silent reflection. Within each season, the hours are given names. So using Jesus' terms, praying the hours of the evening and midnight and cockcrow and dawn, they would be called by these traditional and contemporary names. Compline, or the time of trust. Vigils, or the time of watch. Lauds, or the time of praise. And prime, or the time of discernment. Maybe we can think about this opportunity to pray the hours in Chronos time as a way to stay awake, as an instrument to focus the hours organized around the center. And who is the center? The one we're expecting in Advent, the Christ who is and who was and who is to come. If you're unable to be with us on Wednesday, I encourage you to get a copy of the book if you're able, or you can ask me for more information, and to use it for your own discipline. To join us in prayer, if you can, or wherever you are, as we also pray here at the church at 1 o'clock on Wednesdays. May God help each of us to find a way to focus this Advent season, that we might stay awake for the coming of Christ, overcome fear, and find the times of special meaning, Kairos times, within the days that we are given.